So a few weeks ago, Williams team principal James Vowles raised some eyebrows by claiming that in 2025, Williams will have the best lineup on the grid in Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. Now, when you consider some of the other lineups on the grid in 2025, that may be over-egging the pudding slightly, or he could either be way over his head. But you know what? When it comes down to it, he is just playing the game. You know, he's got to get partners and fans excited about the next season, and also potential sponsors looking his way as well. And also when you consider the claims from Williams that they may be willing to sacrifice their 2025 car in order to benefit 2026, their driver lineup may be the only thing they have to go on right now. So already I'm kind of getting a vibe that he may be hoping his shiny new addition in Carlos Sainz alongside the sturdy Alex Albon may be able to outdrive a car which may be lacking. But anyway, that's 2025, so watch this space. But just before we get into this, click the like button if you're enjoying the video, and also click that subscribe button below. It's great when you support things and it really helps the channel. Now the thing is, when you bolt one small factor onto James Vowles' claim of having the best driver lineup in 2025, it does vaguely start to show signs of making sense. And that small factor, ladies and gentlemen, is Williams' new sensation and Logan Sargent's replacement, Franco Colapinto. And when you bring that into the equation, their entire lineup of Sainz, Albon and Colapinto in reserve, you know, that's a lineup that you wouldn't be unhappy with. It's maybe not the best lineup, but it's certainly up there. And therefore, weirdly, Colapinto has also found himself in this position at Williams where he will be the guy that Williams will test things against to see if they do or don't work. And this also goes for drivers as well. Unlike other teams such as Mercedes or McLaren who have a really solid and proven race-winning driver lineup, it starts to tail off slightly when you do bring their reserve driver into the equation. Now, the only team right now who I can think who have a really stacked driver lineup is Ferrari, who have Sainz, Leclerc and Ollie Bearman in reserve. Bearman has shown us that he can happily jump into a Ferrari and even jump into a Haas and quite happily score points. He as well is a guy who I think is really going to go places. But just very quickly, I did a video a little while ago about Colapinto just before he made his debut, and well, how wrong I was. He's really shown us that he is there on sheer ability. He's not just a pay driver brought in just to cash some checks, and it's actually going to be quite disappointing that he's not going to be on the grid in 2025. But I hope as well you can understand, speaking as a Williams fan, after years of Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargent, I wasn't exactly feeling optimistic about Colapinto coming in, especially when there was some more experienced known names in the hat as well. There's just this feeling of, after being hurt so many times, why would things ever get better now? But for once, they actually did. So fast forward to now, Colapinto has now been crowned the king of motorsport in Argentina. James Vowles made an inspired move to bring him in, and to be honest, I can't wait to see how he closes off the 2024 season. He is well worth keeping an eye out for. And to be honest, I bet Alex Albon is keeping a close eye on him too, because for the first time in his whole tenure at Williams, he now has a teammate who he is really going to have to compete with. You know, gone are the days of your teammate pootling around in 18th, 19th or 20th place, and you only have to do slightly better than them. I mean, God forbid, he might actually have a teammate who can overtake him. Now, I said in a previous video that Albon's real test will come in 2025 when he's up against Carlos Sainz, but that's okay because he'll have the winter break to prepare himself mentally, physically, and just get his head in the right place so that he cannot repeat the same sort of things he did at Red Bull. However, now, unfortunately for Albon, that test from a teammate came a little earlier than anticipated. And whilst Albon has proven that he is a solid driver and can really put the car into positions that it has no business being, he really hasn't been pushed by a teammate since the Red Bull days. And for old Albon, those were dark, dark days. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is that Alex closing off the season alongside Colapinto will give us a better insight into his development since leaving Red Bull and reconstructing himself at Williams. Is he really that team leader who can steer Williams back to the top, or is he another driver who is made to look better than he actually is because of his incompetent, inconsistent teammates? And so now for Albon, outperforming Colapinto in all areas is going to be critical, and that is qualifying, sprint races, the whole thing. He literally must beat him everywhere. And let's not forget, Albon's contract runs with Williams until the end of 2026, so if he is to increase its leverage so he can command perhaps a move to a larger team, or a larger salary, he, of course, is going to have to beat Carlos Sainz. But right here and now, he is going to have to show that he can put this new boy, Colapinto, in his place. But then when you move things along to Carlos Sainz at Williams in 2025, it starts to get really interesting. James Vowles had to ring so many bells and pull so many levers and say so many nice words just to bring Sainz on board. Honestly, salesman of the year. But despite all that, it still feels a bit uncertain how Sainz views Williams in his heart of hearts. Does he feel emboldened with hauling this team back up the grid using every ounce of his blood and sweat? Or is this just any port in a storm? Because the seas of the 2025 driver market look very rough indeed, with just one seat remaining at Sauber, and yeah, nobody wants that. Now, looking down the line, there will come a critical point where one of two things are going to happen. Carlos Sainz will straight up leave for a bigger, more successful team, or he will begin negotiations with Williams to extend his contract. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if a drive did materialise at Red Bull, Mercedes, or even back at Ferrari. He would quite happily jump ship and resume his position back at the front of the grid. Now, with these recent developments, that wouldn't be a complete tragedy, because I do have confidence that Colapinto can keep up this momentum and step into Sainz's shoes if need be. And it would be the same outcome if Sainz started his contract negotiations with Williams and was wanting to command a salary that was well outside of their budget. Thanks to having Colapinto on board, Vowles now has a strong card to play, and also the possibility to say to Sainz, no, you're not having that money. After all, Sainz does have to show us if he can still do the business in a mid-level car. Now, of course, I'm really not wanting to hop on the Colapinto gravy train. Lots and lots of things have to fall in place in order for this to happen still. After all, he does need to show us, Franco, that he's not a one-season wonder, kind of like an extended version of Nick de Vries. And also, Williams need to cling on to him. There's still one seat left at Sauber for 2025, and that is probably the least desired seats on the grid right now. Almost like the chocolates left in the tin a few days after Christmas. That Sauber seat is like the little bounty bar chocolate of the F1 world. Now, I'd love to know what you guys think on this, but if Colapinto was loaned to Sauber for the 2025 season with the sole intent of getting experience and miles under the belt, that experience of running around at the back of the grid, no points, that could very easily just crush him. New talent with a fresh head is so fragile, especially in F1. And as I said, a year running around at the back would destroy not just his confidence, but any hype around his name and also any marketability as well. People will move on from Colapinto and on to the next thing. And in this fast-moving world of F1, if that was to happen, coupled with Williams retaining Albon and Sainz long-term, he could very well find himself without a drive. So it's crucial that Williams, I think, nurture this talent and keep him on board so that if something was to happen, if Sainz or Albon or both were to leave, he could then click straight into one of those seats. And that's the other thing as well. If during 2025 Sainz or Albon had to sit out a race because they're injured, unwell or whatever, if Colapinto is the driver we think he is, he could go into one of those seats and Williams shouldn't miss a beat. Honestly, it's going to be so exciting to watch next year because Williams are now going to have their very own Liam Lawson. And I'm certain next season that after any poor performances from Sainz or Albon, the camera's going to cut straight to Colapinto in the garage, headset on, and he's going to give the camera a knowing smile and, to give you the impression that he knows he can do a better job. Exactly as they did with Lawson if Ricciardo or Tsunoda made a mistake. And I think as well, even though he's standing in at this late point in this season and will be in reserve next season, it's a very smart decision from Williams to launch their own Colapinto merchandise range. Yes, they're actually giving him a merch range. And that really is special for a reserve driver. I know Red Bull have done that in the past with Daniel Ricciardo, but I'm sure it's going to sell more than the Logan Sargent range, which, by the way, is on its way to a bargain bucket at a motorsport event near you. So overall then, I really do have a strong sense that Colapinto is Williams' most important driver right now. And it looks like Williams will experience the Liam Lawson effect, where their drivers know that the guy in reserve and sitting behind them is no pushover and could very well match them perhaps if it came down to it. Now, of course, it won't be the full Liam Lawson effect because I suspect that Williams is a much more pleasant place to work and is not as cutthroat and just generally nasty as Red Bull appears to be. I don't mean nasty, but you know, nowhere is nice to work if you know that you're on the chopping block 24/7. But after all, having Franco waiting in the wings, it might entice the drivers to try that extra 1% or 0.5% harder, which in F1 we've seen can make so much difference. And so with that, Williams having Colapinto on board, it means their drivers are going to have to try that extra bit harder and prove themselves on a much more regular basis. And also it means that the management are less likely to have their arms twisted in a negotiation situation, because if they do, they've got Franco sitting right behind them. But what do you guys think? Is Colapinto the real deal? Will we see him in a Williams seat anytime soon, or perhaps maybe even elsewhere? Anyway, let me know in the comments. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I know it's been a long time since there's a video come out, but the Grid Gab is back. I'm back. I'm Paul, and thank you so much as always for watching. I'll see you later.